Welcome to the Stories of School Leadership podcast, the podcast where we elevate the voices of and create connections between inspirational leaders from the UK and around the world. I'm Emma Lurie, and thank you for joining me as I share these journeys, inspirations, and stories of education, leadership, and life. In this episode, I'm joined by Robyn Vincent, who is head teacher at a fully outdoor school. Robyn talks us through her journey in education, attending lots of different primary schools, and she talks about her journey into education and into leadership and her experiences of positive and negative leadership herself and how that impacted on her keenness to become a leader. We get into lots of discussion about relational practice and the importance of personal, social, emotional development for our young people. Robyn shares her passion for developing a curriculum, really starting from the perspective and point of where children are and how important this is. And she talks to us about what it's like to work at a completely outdoor school, what that looks like, what the challenges are, and how we can take some of her learning and the work that she's doing and how it might fit into a more mainstream curriculum and into our schools. Okay, I love this episode, really, really interesting. I hope you love it too. Let's get going. Hi, Robyn. It's so great to have you with me. I'm so grateful that you're giving up some of your time because I'm fascinated in your story. And before we started recording, I probably wanted to ask you 100 questions, but I've waited until now. It would be lovely to just know what your name is, where you are at the moment, and what your current role is.
Okay, my name is Robyn Vincent. I'm very happy to be here. I am the executive head teacher of 4 outdoor schools for children with social, emotional, mental health, and we are based in Devon.
Amazing. I don't get to speak to many people in Devon, even though that's where I live. So it's lovely to speak to somebody who is local. And I'm really fascinated to find out about your journey, and particularly what you're doing now, because I think it's definitely something we need to find out more about. I certainly hadn't heard of your schools, so, and I have been in Devon nearly all of my career, so I need to find out more. All right, take us right back then. I always like finding out about people's own school experience. Where did you go to school and what was that like for you?
Well, I went to 7 different primaries.
Okay.
My father was a prison officer, and obviously he was transferred around. So I lived on the Isle of Wight, I lived in Dorchester, I lived in Glasgow, Ashburton, lots of different primary schools. But then by the time I got to secondary school, my parents were separated, so we were stable, if you like. So I went to secondary school in Oakhampton. So I've been in Devon quite a long time too.
Wow. And how did you find that? So I feel like you probably got a wide range of school experience. What was that like?
It was it's only really now looking back, I realise how different they all were. So I went so the Dorchester School, for example, was very modern and didn't teach timetables and handwriting in, the way that it was traditionally. And we're talking a long time ago. And then I went from there to a very traditional, tiny village school where we had to write with a fountain pen and do our times tables, and they just pick on you and say what. And I just developed huge maths anxiety at that point. And that school actually was the only one I didn't enjoy attending because my handwriting was appalling. So giving me a fountain pen and making me do, old-fashioned J's with all the sort of curly bits was just not up my street. But generally, I really loved school, and I enjoyed moving around. It was great, you met new people, and I developed a great set of social skills. Just go, hello, I'm Robyn.
Yeah, I bet 7.
So
That's, I
that
mean,
was
pretty
good.
much one each year, isn't it? So a lot of people say that if they've kind of done international moves, you have to develop those skills pretty quickly, don't
Yeah,
you?
yeah. So
Ah,
it was good from that point of view.
amazing. So
Yeah.
what led you to go into education then? What was that kind of next step? Did you think, right, I've done 7, I might as well just keep going and do it myself?
Well, no, to be honest, I never really thought of teaching at all. I was thinking along the lines of maybe HR. I always wanted to be a radio DJ, and yeah, all sorts of different things. That at one point I was going to be a hairdresser, like every little girl, But to be honest, I was a really good girl up until I took my O levels. Although I was very cross because top set girls were not allowed to take typing. We had to take physics. And with my maths issues, so if you were top set, you were top set for everything, and that was it. So my mother, as a secretary bringing up two girls on her own, got very, very angry when she was told that I was too bright to learn to type. So I went, but during my A levels, so I'm living proof that you can make lots of mistakes and still get to somewhere where you can have an impact. So I became pregnant during my A levels. I was 6 months pregnant when I took my A levels.
Oh, wow.
And I got married, and the school wouldn't let me change my name. They said it'll confuse things. You'll have to have your maiden name on your certificates. So at that point, obviously after my A levels, my husband's a farmer. So I was very lucky to be able to stay home for 10 years to bring up all the children. So my youngest child and I both started our sort of school on the first day, if you like,
Yeah.
at the same time. So she went to school and I went to my first job. So to be honest, when my English teacher discovered I probably wasn't going to university, she very sort of just an offhand throwaway comment said, "Oh, that's such a shame, such a waste. Do think about the Open University." So I spent the next 10 years getting my degree and my PGCE with the Open University, bringing up the children, running a farm, and we had an ice cream business as well.
Oh, wow. Not busy then.
No,
Found a
no.
few different things to do.
Yeah, but I was just determined that I wasn't, that mistake wasn't going to kind of define me. I wanted a job, my own money, that kind of thing. So honestly, I literally chose teaching because it fitted in with the kids' holidays and the harvesting.
Yeah.
I was here to help with the bales and
And you
stuff.
could do it all. So you didn't have the normal summer holiday break then that some teachers like to have.
Did my other job.
Perfect. Well, it sounds like you were very busy. And so what was your first kind of in terms of career wise, first school and then what led you into the leadership roles?
Well, I so teen school in Kingstainton was my first school, and I was appointed, in the July. I was actually appointed on the last day of term in July. There were 3 jobs and 3 people, and it was like, if I don't get this, there's something wrong. But I was just grateful to be getting started. So they appointed me in the July to point 4 as a secondary English teacher, and then by the time I went in September, it had gone up to point 8 of the
Oh,
time.
yeah. And by Christmas, was it more?
Well, yeah. So by the following year, I was full time. And by the following year, I'd also taken on media studies.
Okay.
I was English and media studies in a sort of 6-person department in Kingstainton. I stayed there for 8 years because I kept getting progression. So I was deputy head of the English department, deputy head of year 9 and deputy head of year 12. And then I was head of media studies, at which point I became a senior examiner in media for AQA. And then I did a couple of postgraduate modules of study. And then my head teacher sort of said, well, you really, if you're going to go any further, you're really going to have to get experience of a different school. So this was quite a rural school, a good school, And he said, you probably need to look to get some experience of some more challenging behaviour. So I transferred then into Exeter to a school that was actually an RI at the time. Suffering. People think that Exeter is this lovely country town, but it suffered a lot of the same inner city issues. A lot of gangs, a lot of knife crime, a lot of drugs, a lot of absenteeism, a lot of families struggling. So I really learned a lot.
Yeah.
And I was head of year 11 there, and various other things I was doing. But getting into the reason I wanted to get into leadership is because I've always been one of those people that when I see something that I think isn't quite right or could be done better, I think, right, well, I'll do it then.
Do it myself.
So, yes, it was very much a kind of change from within sort of attitude that I wanted to get into leadership. But I found it very difficult to get past that upper middle leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And I became quite delusioned at that point. I spent a lot of time being told I wasn't enough of a Rottweiler to be a head teacher.
Oh, wow, that's an interesting
Yeah. So after a
notion.
while, you kind of you believe it if you're told often enough. I mean,
Yeah.
I went for several interviews. I remember one particular interview, I was debriefed by two separate people, and one of them said, "We're a little bit concerned about whether you come across as tough enough." The other one, same interview, said, "You need to be careful you don't come across as a ball breaker because it frightens the interview panel." So
Oh, wow.
how could the same interview bring about both those reactions? That was the point at which I went, you know what, I don't think this is me.
No. And before that, if you look back over your career in terms of teaching and then into leadership, what different people inspired you? Like, did you see both of those sides or?
I saw a lot of people who led through fear
Mhm.
and led through their authority, and they were kind of in it for the status. Um, but I also saw people who saw the work that teachers were doing, that encouraged, that got what they wanted out of the staff through that encouragement and empathy and acknowledgement, rather than that kind of fear.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I, I saw a lot of people who discouraged me and a lot of people who really encouraged me. So I had both, really.
Yeah, a little bit of who you don't want to be and a little bit of snippets of what
You've got
you
to be
do want to
careful
be.
though with because when I finally kind of made it into leadership, if you like, I was an assistant head at a special needs school, in a maintained school in Plymouth. Um, and by that time, I was really kind of quite clear about what my style was and the kind of leader I was not going to be. And then when I came into this job and I suddenly had the trust of my directors and the freedom to develop the school. When we started, we were two sites with 21 children and 18 children and 21 staff. We're going to be at 97 children and 80 staff come February. So I had all that freedom to develop that, and the pendulum swung a little bit too far, because in trying so hard to be what I didn't want to be, you can go a little bit too far the other way. And if you're not careful, you can create a kind of sense of entitlement.
Mm.
Staff sort of think, oh, well, Robyn will do that for me, or, you know, Robyn won't mind. Or so I had to have a little bit of pendulum adjustment. But that's where my leadership coaching came in. I'm a women's leadership coach for one of many.
Amazing. Okay. So tell me a bit more about this period of time where you were disillusioned by the system, and I know then that sort of made you make a different decision about which sort of schools you want to work in. But what was that disillusionment about?
Well, I think I remember there was actually a moment when I decided I don't think I can do this anymore. And I was standing in front of a class of about 32 top set year 10 students who were all predicted A's and A stars, because it was letters back then. And we've been kind of told in some moderation training that what stopped these young people getting their A stars was that they weren't engaging on a personal level enough with the texts. They were saying all the right things and getting all the techniques and all that kind of stuff, but there wasn't that personal sort of engagement with the poetry,
Yeah.
particularly. So being the media teacher, I bought an animation software program, and I said, right, we're going to go into the Mac suite, and you put it in groups, and you're all going to take a poem from the anthology, and you're going to create an animation of what the poem's about and what it meant for you and all that kind of thing. And there was this stunned silence in the classroom, and somebody said, yeah, but we'll do it the normal way after that, won't we? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you know, when you go through the poem and you tell us what all the techniques are and why the poet might have used them, you'll do that afterwards, won't you? And I said, you know, you're not understanding. You're not, if you're going to get the highest grades, you've got to have a personal, well, yeah, we'll do it, but you'll do that afterwards, won't you? And they couldn't let this go. And I'm sort of standing there thinking, what am I doing? I could give these children the textbook. They've got the parents at home to support them. They could go and get their A grade without ever having spoken to me. What am I doing? And the school I'd been in previously, the one in Exeter with the behaviour problems, as head of year 11, I'd worked with the most challenged young people. and I missed them. I there was a moment where a child on the reception said, "It's a phone call for you." It's the child's name. And I said, 10 o'clock, what are you doing? Why aren't you in school? She said, "Miss, could you come to the park?" I said, "Well, you're going to have to give me a little bit more than that. Why do I need to come to the park?" "Oh, well, my friend, pupil B, has drunk a bottle of vodka on the way to school and I don't know what to do." On my way.
Coming right now.
And then when I'm standing in front of this top set class, we're all lovely children, but just going, I'm not making any impact on these children at all. So that was the point at which I chose to go into special. I'm not even sure if that's what you asked me, but
no, it is. It was about that, that disillusionment. And I guess that bit is around. I really heard you talking about that passivity of our learners, that they're just so used to us feeding them. We are the fountain of all knowledge as teachers and educators. Our curriculum as it currently stands is very knowledge heavy. And I certainly got that, feel that sense as well, that we have young people who sit there thinking, right, I'm here, a vessel to be filled, give me the knowledge and I'll just, I'll do what I need to do with it. And they learn the strategies, but actually do they have this in-depth sense of understanding it, but also knowing what to then do with it? Like we're just teaching them. If we talk about the testing system that we currently have, we're just teaching them to pass the test, and do they really understand the point of it and what they're going to use it for? I mean, how many times does a child say to us, "Wow, when do I need this in the real world?" And actually that's kind of living proof of the sense of these children who you'd given amazing skills and knowledge to, but didn't really have a sense of what the purpose of what that was.
And
Was there anything else in terms of I guess, the other aspects of like curriculum or policy or strategy that you just thought this just isn't fitting with your values?
we're not teaching learners to be lifelong learners. We're paying lip service to it, but for me, real learning is knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. And knowing that Byron's really keen on alliteration isn't going to help you with that. It's not even true, but but that's not real learning. That's not producing young people who are going to be facing the problems that society and the world and the planet is going to be facing. There's no flexibility. There's no room to make a mistake. There's no room to learn how to make the best of a mistake. I was never allowed to make a mistake. I was a top set girl. I passed everything. I mean, the first time I failed something, it was like, oh my God, I don't have the tools to deal with this. What?
No.
Going on?
And we know that the real world, we're faced with just failure after, that's just being a human, being an adult, you just fail and you're right. I think not whether we build that into, have it as an element of a strand of our PSED or our, PD curriculum. Okay, there's a little bit there, isn't there? But we're not doing the doing in our teaching. And that's really clear. Kids get that. You can tell us what to do in one lesson, but then you're not actually showing that it's okay to do those things in other lessons.
And if you think about, I truly believe, and it might sound a bit cynical, but I truly believe that at the moment, with our education and assessment system, this country will never produce, or will produce very few real innovators. Because to innovate, you have to try and fail time and time and time again. And if you can't do that, then everybody's just going to go with the flow, aren't they? And of course, there's the old chestnut as well, that we're preparing them for our world, not the one that they're going to face.
Well, and that's right. So, I mean, I love that quote, knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. I mean, how many of our young people, and you see it in the smallest of moments. I mean, I'm primary, my where I've been mostly working is primary, and you just see it in that bit where they go, oh, I don't have a pencil. You remind me of that A Bug's Life, when they get to the leaf and they just go, oh, I'm lost. And I just think that's what we're doing, because they've got to use this pencil and they've got to use this paper. And when it's not available, like, it all stops, it all falls down when their teacher's not there. But actually, from an earliest perspective, young people are born to learn. We just don't give them that trust and those tools to actually go, do you know what? Let's work this out together and let's do it.
Well, and our sort of philosophy is very much around metacognition, metacognition and constructivism, about meeting the child where they are. And so we know what we're trying to teach, obviously, but about 2 years ago, I threw out the national curriculum and completely rewrote our own.
Did you burn it?
And phases? Yeah, I just said, we're not doing that anymore. That's it. So the things they need to learn, the basic maths and English and that kind of thing, are still in the curriculum, but we don't assess them against each other. We don't assess them against national norms. We only assess them against themselves. Are you better than you were at this last time we looked at it? And so the thing that the teacher with the teacher-led project, everything we do is project-based. So the tutors lead the projects in the early years, and then as they go, they're developing their own projects because they know they have a radar chart and they know what skills they're trying to fill. So we get them to that stage. But the outcome of the project was looking at how things were are classified in science, different things like that. And we were looking at tree species, and most of the group were absolutely fine with that. And they wanted to know about trees and all the rest of it. One of them, quite a long way down the spectrum, was having none of that, not in the slightest bit interested in trees and wasn't prepared to engage. But what he would do was classify British Rail's trains. So he learned what we were trying to teach, but in his own way.
Oh, that's so powerful. And I guess we briefly touched on this before we started recording, the possibility of having the freedom to recognize that what we want to teach can be taught in a different way. And I recognize that the challenges we have in our current mainstream system is that the funding's not necessarily there to have all the adults to do it in a way. I think there are certainly lots of things we could do if we stripped out the curriculum and had a different focus. But the power of being able to show our young people that there's lots of different ways you can learn these things, and you can have your own interest and you can have your own way of following your learning path is so powerful. So obviously you've said that you stepped into special ed after feeling that disillusionment. What was that journey like, and what did you learn along the way of kind of going into special ed?
Well, you learn a lot of resilience because we've all done it on those sort of odd days. You think, oh, I'll extend the silent reading at the start of the lesson from 10 minutes to 15 just because it's Friday. But with the special ed learners, they go from 0 to 60 in 0.5 of a second. You've got to be on it all the time, which is exhausting, but you have to build relationships. You have no choice. You have to build a relationship with the child. There's the class of 32, and everybody's name and you know who they are, but that's about the extent of it. And you meet the family on parents' evening. With special ed kids, you're talking to the parents 3 to 4 times a week. And the learners will tell you all sorts and talk to you about stuff that's completely irrelevant, but is such moments of learning. So it was about the relationships. It was about thinking on your feet. There is none of this. Well, it's week 2, term 3, English year 10. It must be Act 2, Scene 1 of Romeo and Juliet, because that's what we always do. You don't, you learn to plan differently. So you learn to plan A, plan B, and plan C. Then plan B is, let's go out and play football.
When it all goes wrong. I guess a sense of freedom, though, is that freedom that you have the ability, your young people need you to be super flexible, and you have to be really open to what that could look like depending on them. And I guess depending on them on whichever day or whichever hour it is.
For what's happened in the lesson before, or anything really. It might just be. So I had a learner. So one of my first experiences in special, I had a great TA who really kind of helped me get used to it. But there was one year 11 that sometimes will come into the classroom without a murmur, and other times would just flatly refuse to come in. And we couldn't get to the bottom of what the difference was. We looked at the lesson he'd had before. There was no pattern there. Wasn't the same day of the week. Nothing. And I remember having this really odd conversation with him where it came out that he didn't like me wearing black. So if I was wearing black, he wouldn't come into the classroom. Now, it took me months to work that out. And then I then became very kind of attuned to that. So there's another learner a few years later who unfortunately had a very traumatic childhood, a lot of abuse. And the abuse occurred when his parents went out. So when he saw his mother putting lipstick on, he knew it was not going to be a good night. So if I was wearing lipstick that he could see, he was shut off completely.
Wow.
So building those relationships becomes the first and only thing you do, really, to start with.
Yeah.
And
And that's fascinating, because I hear that in the context that you're working in there, and and still in that those sorts of schools, you have to have that deep attunement. You need to understand that. But there must be so many parallels to all of our schools, but we just don't make the time, or we don't recognize the value of knowing all our young people this well. We will have children who might have had similar experiences, who could be in a mainstream school or in any school. But
yeah,
yeah, it's
and I
fascinating.
think the difference is that generally neurotypical children can cope, can kind of shut off,
Yeah.
and they want to fit in, and they can do that. But neurodiverse children very rarely understand why they should have to do that. So it just sort of, well, you've got lipstick on, so I'm not coming in. Why don't I don't care if you understand it. I'm just not coming in.
You had to buy a whole new wardrobe, then go and get some different makeup, depending on which day of the week it was.
And then you, as I say, talk about having plan A, plan B, and plan C. I don't know what was going on. I can't remember, but we were actually doing Romeo and Juliet, because these learners were capable of getting a GCSE, so we were doing some Shakespeare because I had to write an essay. And my TA, there was a student. He was under the desk in one corner, so she was going through the Queen Mab speech with him, and I had a learner who was shut himself in the cupboard, but still wanted to do the lesson. So we only had the two of them in that day. And I just looked across and I, never in a million years would anybody believe this.
Yeah, but that's where the joy is, when it's different and unusual, and that's where you're making a huge difference, isn't it? That you are willing to have a lesson with a child in a cupboard. Go for it.
Fine. Whatever you need, really. But so I kind of started to think very differently then, because I had a lot of autistic children in my exam class. So we had a system where I could look at their computer from my desk. So I would sit with my back to them. Their desks were arranged so their backs were to me. And I designed all the lessons online, and they would accept the computer saying, oh, have a look at question 4. Have you thought about, if I appeared on their shoulder and said that, oh, what about that? They'd go, tell me where to go. But they would accept it because it was the computer telling them. And so I started to think very differently then. And then obviously when I got the opportunity to do what I'm doing now, it was like, right, we can be really
tell me more about this. I need to know more about your outdoor schools, and also about how you've designed the curriculum, because it feels like that's really special.
Well, the outdoors bit, the learners arrive at 10 and they go at 3:30, but staff are 9 till 5, so there's plenty of time for staff to do the things they need to do. Day starts with grounding and check-in. So some learners need to go and run, some like to read a book, whatever, and check in that the adults take part. Each group of 8's got a fire pit with a tarp, and they have their check-in there. Breakfast is available off the fire if they want it, and they've got a 3-sided field shelter as well, but the grounding and the check-in takes place around the fire. Then the morning is project-based learning, depending on their age, whether they're teacher-led or learner-led. And then in the afternoon, we've got things like our interventions, talk about literacy and maths, and tool-based learning. So people think we're mad because we give these learners knives and axes and all sorts of things, not when they're dysregulated, I'd like to point out. But we do a lot of whittling and tool-based work and all that kind of thing. Lunch is cooked by the learners on the fire. They don't have to eat it, of course. They still take part in the cooking if they want to. It took us 18 months to get one learner to have a sausage off the fire, and nobody understood it. I was so excited. I said to my husband, and he's looking at me going,
it's just a sausage.
Yes. So that's sort of roughly how the curriculum works, but it is all based around projects and things like that. We have mixed age groups, so they might have finally worked out that it would be a lot easier to light their fire if they had a woodshed and dry wood, and we stand back and let them discover that. And then they, of course, have to write to me permission. They have to work out how much wood they need for the woodshed. They have to design it. They have to build it, budget, all that kind of thing. So you might have a learner who might be 14 and is so far behind for whatever reason that he's never learned to measure. So he might be learning how to measure for this. And there might be another one who's capable of doing the trick to work out the angle of the roof and how much wood we need. So the project involves all learners.
Wow. And you mentioned that your learners are often, have come from really challenging experiences themselves, whether they've had suspensions or exclusions or a mixture of different educational journeys, I guess.
Yeah, well, I had a learner who, so we get the consult paperwork, and they say, can you meet need or not? And I looked at this. I was the Senko at the time, and I looked at it, and this young learner, it said that she ate things, and the last thing she tried to eat was a light bulb. So I said, I didn't meet the child. I said, look, best will in the world, we do poisonous plant walks, but I can't guarantee her safety. So and they failed to place her 3 or 4 months later. They came back to, would you just meet with her? So I met with her, did the consult, and I said to her, I said, look, it says here, the last thing you tried to eat was a light bulb. Tell me about that. She said, well, I've been locked in a room for 3 hours. What was I supposed to do? I had to get their attention. So she was absolutely, and she's absolutely thriving now. She's the vice chair of my junior leadership team.
Wow.
So, all sorts of backgrounds, but that wasn't what you asked me.
Well, it was an example of where, the experiences that some of your young people have had. And I know, before we started recording, you said sometimes we're the end of the line for them. These are young children and young people who've not managed to get on in other settings that they've tried. And this is an opportunity where it's done so differently.
Yeah, so I've got to say we've got lots of parents who are fantastic who support us. I've got vacancies on my governing board, but they're not parent vacancies. they're just they're fantastic. Our parents, they're absolutely fantastic. But what drove the change to the curriculum was that I was brand new. So I was a Senko in September, and I took over as head in the February half term, and followed 3 weeks later by COVID. And in between,
At least you're outdoors.
well, yeah, but they said put your outdoor school online. I mean, I'm entirely sure that will work. But in between starting in February and COVID, Ofsted came, so they hadn't even given us a year to get started. And we were very generously, I feel, given RI at that point, because he could tell that we knew what we had to do. So that was interesting, shall we say. But so in order to, I just put things in place. I just put in systems that I knew and understood. Let's get the systems in and then start to work. So I was saying to start, one of the big things that some staff find difficult when they come to us is that if a child needs to be grounded all day, if the one-to-one's taken one look at them and they get out the taxi and gone, no chance, we're grounding all day, I'm not going to come and say, why haven't you done what you planned? Or you haven't done your work, so you have a lunchtime detention. We don't do that. If the child needs to be grounded all day, then you have done what that child needed, and they'll come back tomorrow.
And what does that look like? What does, if they're grounded all
Well,
day, look like?
Football, they might
Okay.
want to spend the day chopping wood, or and
Just like regulating and doing the activities that they need to help them that day.
And it very, very rarely lasts all day. That they come sort of round to where they need to be. But what was happening was that I was saying to staff this was okay, and that I don't care what you do as long as you're meeting that learner's needs and keeping them safe. And staff were going, you sure you're not going to come down on me like a ton of bricks? What's this about? But then they were saying, that's all very well. You're telling us in phase 1, which is our key stage 2, that it's the social, emotional and mental health needs that are important. We've got to get these children where they can self-regulate. We've got to do what they need. But then you ask us to assess against the national curriculum, which I was doing because I didn't know what else to do. So that's when I ran, oh, for Pete's sake, this is ridiculous. Right, we'll get rid of it. So
put it on one of the fires at breakfast.
Yeah. So I designed, I could never remember them all. I meant to look them up before I spoke to you. But so we now assess them against knowing myself, knowing others, being understood, explore and create. And there are
It's no judgment. They sound great.
But those are so instead of English, math, science, are you better at knowing yourself now? Are you better at knowing others? Can you be understood? So that's our phase 1, because that allows staff the freedom to show that they've made progress in the areas that the child needs to make progress. Because real learning takes a lot of risk. It's a lot of risk to learn. So if you get them where they feel safe, first thing that happens when they feel safe is we see all the extreme behaviours. Then we deal with that. And then they realise that we can be trusted and all that kind of thing. So then our phase 2, which is our sort of key stage 3, is where we do go back to the national curriculum just to get a sense of where the learners are, but they're still doing project-based, they're still doing their own radar charts, so that we can get them ready for phase 3, which is our key stage 4, and where we are, again, still completely bespoke. So we don't take learners after year 7 because you want time to do that 3 years phase 1 with them. So we had our first year 11 leave in July. They only had 2 of them because we've grown them through.
Yeah.
It was heartbreaking.
Oh, I bet.
But that young man had 120 restraints in his first year, and none in his last 2 years. He was the chair of the junior leadership team. He got a place at Bicton College to do a construction course. He got functional skills level 1 in English and maths, plus a load of ASDANs. And we've just heard from the college that he is supporting a young man who's just had an autism diagnosis, and he's supporting him to help him understand. So it's like,
Oh,
and that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, to be
yeah,
honest.
that's amazing though. And I guess you will know what the trajectory for young people who,
Yes.
aren't offered what you are offering, and I've seen it. I've worked in primary schools and I can see what happens when we are trying to get some of our young people, and actually a lot of our young people would benefit from what you're doing, sounds incredible, but we are trying to shoehorn them into this system that just doesn't fit their bodies and their minds and how they work and what they feel able safely to do. But by giving them an alternative route, you've set them up for successful adulthood. And that's such a powerful, rather than shoehorning them all the way and then letting them out into adulthood, bless them, where they're just not going to have the skills to survive. By
No.
taking a different route when they're younger, you've got him and you will get many others to that. And that's so powerful.
And he may well end up taking, high level qualifications in English and maths when he decides what he wants to do after that, but
Yeah.
he'll have been equipped with the ability to regulate himself
Yeah.
and to be actually really useful to society. But more important than that, to be happy.
Yeah. I was
To
going
be
to say, what's
happy.
that like when you sick? I'm guessing potentially you're having young learners coming to you who are expecting to be taught. I know that they probably know this is a slightly different way, but I'm assuming they're coming to you thinking, oh my gosh, another school. And then what's that like when they start to see that this is different and they can thrive?
Well, you tend to go sort of one or two ways, really, and I'm being quite stereotypical now, but you get, I mean, first of all, nobody believes us.
Yeah.
First come and then they go, "Is it like this every day?" Yes.
It's not just a honeymoon period.
Yeah, but then you get some young people who come in and they've learned not to draw attention to themselves. They've learned, so they sit very quietly. We're going, why are they here? What? Because they do everything we tell, And then as they gradually begin to feel safe, they start to exhibit the behaviours that maybe got them, where they are. And then you get some learners who come in going, right, what have I got to do to get excluded from here then?
Yeah.
And they'll be often be quite violent and aggressive, either to staff or to other learners or whatever, because they've learned that if they're violent, adults will leave them alone. And it takes us a while to go, yeah, you're not getting away. No, not having it. And gradually so some learners, for example, aren't able to tell they're about to dysregulate.
Mm.
They might not know that they're cold or hungry, and suddenly they're just really angry and they don't know why. So the first job really is to help them recognize, and every time it happens, you just get them a little bit before and a little bit before and a little bit before, till we get to the point where they know how they're beginning to feel and they know what to do about it. That's not to say they don't have ups and downs. They do. And we do have a positive handling ethos where we do sometimes lay hands on a child for their safety.
Mm.
Somebody else's, and then we take that really seriously. We use price, and that's a full day's training every year for all the staff. and a week's training every year for our instructors. We do take it very, very seriously.
And that's an important model to keep our young people safe, though. And I think a lot of people, I've spoken to a few people recently around thinking about sending mainstream and our young people who are really struggling. And they've talked a lot about actually by using those positive handling strategies, that makes our young people feel safe. If we allow them to, we can have our boundaries in place, and by having the access to the outdoors, it sounds like there's so many opportunities for them to ground in a way that is really safe. But actually, if we're allowing children just to trash places and hurt other people, they don't understand what is going to keep them safe. And if we can contain them and hold those feelings, big as they may be, actually that's real security, as long as we can do it in a way that's safe, and we put all of those things in place for them.
And the other thing I think that you very often, schools don't have time to deal with is that after an incident like that, there's an awful lot of toxic guilt. The children feel very bad about that. And that's sometimes where they won't come into school because they feel so bad about what they've done. Or I mean, I'm talking, we have a huge range of learners, but just having the time to do what that learner needs and to help them. Our aim is to produce adults who can have a happy, fulfilled life. That's what we're trying to do. And my wonderful year 11, it makes me cry every time I think about it.
Oh, I don't, you'll set me off. I'm a right crier. What's the, I guess, trajectory then? So is this quite new? How many schools like this are there in the UK? And I'm guessing it's growing because the need is there. What's the trajectory?
So we got good at Ofsted 18 months ago, and that has opened up things a lot. I think a lot of people were quite rightly kind of going, oh, let's see how this, and now we've convinced Ofsted that what we're doing is the right thing to do to produce, real learners. That's helped a lot. There are sort of forest schools and things like that out there. As far as I'm aware, I don't know of anybody else that's using a similar curriculum to us. We're working with 3 or 4 schools at the moment who want to see what we're doing, looking to see how we can support that. But I'm a bit if things aren't working, I don't like to put up with them.
Good.
So
we need a bit more of that in mainstream, Robyn.
Well, yes, but it's the freedom, isn't it? And turning a mainstream school is like turning a Titanic, isn't it? Or turning a big ship. It's not going to happen overnight. And I do have a bit more adaptability, but I'm currently radically designing CPD for staff, so somebody could come to me from college and I could show them the route that they could get my job if they wanted to. So we're going to design our own teacher training, design some accredited certificates, and the company offers forest skill leaders training and all that kind of first aid and that kind of thing. And we support homemade groups. And then what I'm doing tomorrow, I'm going to present what we're doing with a view to, so having sorted out the curriculum, I've now got to sort out the assessment. So we want to do some participatory research where the learners help us design how they show us what they've learned. So how can you show, rather than sitting a test or something, how can you show us what you've learned and get them involved in that, with an eventual view to having externally accredited level 1 and level 2 qualifications that value what we're actually teaching, so that they still have English and maths entry level or functional skills or whatever, but to have a qualification around, I don't know myself and knowing others, or I don't know what we'd call it. We'd probably be able to call it that, but that's.
I mean, I think there's a lot of adults that could do with a qualification in that. These are the things that we forget. And, I'm passionate about early years. So we see this teaching happening in early years. And for some reason, like I said, we think that, a bit, half an hour of PSHE a week is going to do the rest from year 1 right up through into year 6 and then in secondary. No, we need this to be, and I know that lots of schools do a great job of threading their values through it. There's a lot of that, but actually we don't value it enough. We value these knowledge that is separated into subjects. We don't value us as humans and understanding how to regulate ourselves and work with each other and know what we need. And
just identifying your own strengths and collaborating and having the confidence in your own skills to say, do you know what? I mean, I'm a starter, not a finisher.
Oh, me too.
So, but I know, I mean, I could finish it, but I know there are people who do it so much better than me. So why wouldn't I ask them to do that? What, what's the problem? That's why I liked media studies, because for the exam, you have the question, the task 2 weeks beforehand, and you can talk to people and get ideas and do research. Well, that's how the real world works. You don't
Yes.
sit in a media company and design an advert campaign without talking to marketing, without talking to graphics, without talking to music, do you? You don't.
No. No, and you don't submit things that you don't have the opportunity to edit. Or you're right that, yeah, our current assessment system is absolutely ludicrous.
When they took the speaking and listening out of the GCSE English,
Yeah.
employers were saying it's all very well, they've got 10 A stars, but ask them to talk to a customer, no clue. So
No.
we're valuing what we can measure, not measuring what we value. And like, as you say, there are lots of schools do fantastic jobs, and it's exactly the right thing for kids. But I just feel this frustration that we don't allow kids to follow their passion.
No.
Somebody said something like, if you've got a kid who's a talented tennis player and hopeless at maths, don't hire a maths tutor, hire a tennis tutor.
Yeah, I've seen that quote. I love it.
Let
So
them follow
it's,
their passion, because that's where we get our inventors from.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
get very passionate about it. So.
No, rightly so. I think it's so important, and it's amazing to hear that you have found a route that enables you to do what you love. And I can see in your face you light up when you talk about your young people and the opportunity that you've had to do it differently and to prove to yourself and others that this works, because we should have a range of opportunities. We should have, school shouldn't just be one size fits all. I really think, we miss a trick with that. We need to, and things are happening. I feel like things are changing, and there are a range of different schools
Yeah.
for, some for all children, lots in the special sector, because there's, and that need is there. It's like, if we don't offer something different, these young people aren't getting it. But there's so much we can learn. I guess before
Yeah.
we finish, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what can mainstream schools learn from where where you are and what you've learned in the last few years.
Well, my best example is sort of, rather than thinking of teaching, think about facilitating. So I happen to be watching, I see some wonderful things going on, and that the tutor they were doing a project around electricity. So they were trying to build a circuit to make a light bulb come on. Standard teaching, whenever, I can't remember what my subjects were called, but standard stuff. And this lad said, so if we turn the light on, does that mean that's how electric cars work? It makes the wheels go round. And instead of explaining how that works, the tutor said, here's a kit, go off with the TA, see if you can do it. She said, I don't know, I'm not sure. Why don't you go and try? So off he went, spent an hour and a half, which for our learners is concentration. But he spent an hour and a half trying and failing. So trying something different and failing and trying something different again, till the wheel went round, and he came running back. Miss, it works. Look, I worked it out. If we'd said to that child, sit there where I explained how electric works, sit on that seat behind that desk with the door closed for an hour and fill out this worksheet of how an electric circuit works. So by facilitate, I think there must be a way in mainstream to facilitate their interests a little bit more and allow that bit of exploration. Because I truly believe, as human beings, if we don't learn to make mistakes, I don't know where we're headed. I'm telling my grandmother now, I don't know what it's all coming to. Where will it all end?
You're right. And I think, you've explained that moment, and every single teacher, because, okay, there are moments in our mainstream national curriculum that there are moments where you do get practical lessons, or you go on a trip, or you take the kids outside and you see them light up, don't you? That moment where there's discovery, there's fascination, there's awe and wonder and joy. And those are the bits that we love. But
That's what I'm teaching for.
yeah, but how many of those moments do we sometimes get in the primary or secondary curriculum, because of the way that the accountability measures are, or because of the way that our learning so often is set up? There's so many pressures. I talk to lots of people about saying, well, when I first started teaching, it felt we've always had parameters, but it felt a lot more free. And there was loads of moments like that. I would laugh my head off. I'd come home and say, oh, you'll never guess what we did today, and this, and had so much freedom. And it just feels like that's, for lots of schools, that's becoming less and less. And we need to get it back.
Well, we do, because if you look at the state of young people's mental health at the moment, it's always been, when you get to 10 and 11, always going to be a tough couple of years, shouldn't be like that. Really shouldn't. And there's the state of mental health at the moment. I mean, that's where we very much benefit from the outdoors, that whole spiritual grounding connection with nature, not to mention the open space. but also it's that the turning of the seasons. It's kind of inevitable, and we're going to have to adapt, and we're going to have to, and all that sort of thing. That somehow there just doesn't seem to be any room for in year 10 and 11.
No. And you're right, I guess that's a part of the bit of being outdoors is the power of it. But in the same way, we have recommendations about how many hours young people are supposed to be outside. Again, our schools aren't set up. They're not built in a way that has access to enough outside space, or outside spaces that give them opportunities to be entertained for long enough where they can be outside. But yeah, the power of being outside. I guess maybe for some of your young people, that's a really new experience for them to be outside for such a long time.
And not to, we don't have desks and chairs. We have log stumps that they sit on, and they don't have to, and there's no full walls, and and if they feel themselves dysregulating, they haven't got to put their hand up or fill in a piece of paper or whatever it is they have to do. They just go to their safe space when we've worked with them long enough for them to be able to do that, and then they come back. That I don't, it's
that freedom, yeah.
So I know we are dealing with neurodiverse children, but there are a lot of neurotypical children who hide the stresses and anxieties they're having, and that's why we end up with such anxiety in year 10 and 11, particularly post-COVID, obviously, of course.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I've worked with so many young people who, whether there's elements of neurodiversity or not, ultimately they come alive when they are outside. They live for their break times and lunch times, and all parents are saying, gosh, after school I just have to take them to the park. I've got 2 girls, and the same, sometimes I just think I'm going to take them out to a field and let them run, because they've been holding it all together. And actually, if we know that most young children need to let off steam, can we build that into the day more? I think we should, and there's ways of doing it, isn't there?
A way of being somehow more flexible to young people's needs, and keeping that. When the students get to year 10 and 11 in mainstream, there's none of that awe and wonder and how to play and discover and explore, because there's no time in the curriculum. As an employer, if I'm employed, so obviously I am an employer, when I'm recruiting, if I see somebody who may not have got a standard set of qualifications, but I can see them instinctively, for example, kind of hunker down and get on the child's level. Nobody's taught them to do that skill specifically, but their understanding of how that child might feel. I mean, my son works for my school, all above board and everything, but he's 6'6". So if you've got a small child who's feeling vulnerable, that small child is going to see a threat, and if he was to smile, they might see bared teeth and just go for him, And so people that are empathetic and can instinctively see, those are the skills we can't teach our staff. They come ready to meet these children where they are. And that's something we should be doing as human beings, is meeting all the people we interact with where they are. I mean, that sounds kind of hippy-dippy and sort of idealistic, but that's what I'd like society to be.
Yeah, but idealistic is what we need, isn't it? We need, and I think, to be saying, actually, one of what you said there is time. If we could give our staff, and therefore our young people, time to be met where they are, if we could just ask for that, and that might mean stripping out the curriculum, that might mean changing quite radically accountability and assessment systems, but I think we'd get a really successful end point, and isn't that what we want?
And I think employers would get employable people. I mean, I'm not saying that people that leave school with 10 A stars and then get master's degrees. Society needs those too. But we also need, the other people.
A balance.
Yeah. And there should be schools for kids who want to sit there. I just want to sit there and learn. I'm going to learn how to code in the next 10 minutes. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that either. And there's nothing wrong with the mainstream system for the children for whom it suits. We just have to be a bit more
and more options that maybe haven't just been given because child, and that, I guess that's it, isn't it? Young people who have an EHCP, a world is open up to them. The actual route to get the HCP is absolutely horrific at times. So, and then that becomes a really unfair system. But actually, if we had a range of schools that had different ways of learning, and if your school, schools like yours were available to all learners, there was different opportunities. Like, wouldn't that be incredible?
For typical children, but it's very difficult to kind of navigate through the kind of systems and all that kind of thing. Because
wouldn't that be amazing?
We don't want to become a fee-paying school where only those who can afford it. Because that's not what we're about.
No. Oh, Robyn, it's been so, I could speak to you for hours. I am fascinated in what you're doing, and I guess what you're learning, because this is an amazing opportunity for the young people that you're serving now. But I think we've got so much that we can learn. And it might not be, I often talk about this kind of, we've got mainstream and current curriculum, and our current system is here. And lots of people, like you talked about, having an ideology about things being totally different, but we might not need to go that far. We can just learn, from what you're doing, from what there's amazing schools in the UK and internationally doing things just differently. And if we could just start to step in a direction that feels a little bit different, wouldn't that be brilliant?
Just talk to each other. Let's get all the best ideas, and let's we can make them work for every child. That would be wonderful.
It would. Thank you so much for your time. It's been fascinating to speak to you. We will post links to some of the things you're doing, because I think probably people will be thinking, right, we're all going to Devon and we need to go and see Robyn and see how this school works, because it sounds absolutely amazing. So thank you so much for your time.
I just want to make sure people don't think that I'm completely dissing everything that all the schools do. I'm not at all. I'm just saying we do it differently.
But that's what's so special, isn't it? And I think you're not, I speak to so many people who feel that disillusionment with current systems, and we know that some people are so happy in that, there's mainstream schools, there's independent schools, there's private schools doing wonderful things, but there are also a lot of people who either serve young people who are struggling, and they're probably thinking, oh my gosh, they would love Robyn's school, this sounds amazing, or there are staff thinking, do you know what we can be so stuck in the way of doing things, we haven't even thought that there are other ways of doing it. And it's amazing for you to hear your journey, that you felt disillusioned, but you found a different path, and it's led you to be able to do what you're doing now, which is amazing.
Very grateful for the opportunity to talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Stories of School Leadership podcast. We'd love to know what inspired you in this episode, so do get in touch and tell us your thoughts. And please share this with friends and colleagues. If you have time, a review would mean so much. It really helps us to reach more people. If you'd like to connect with me to follow my journey or access some support, maybe supervision, coaching, or early years consultancy, you can find me at Stories of School Leadership on Instagram. I'm Emma Lurie on LinkedIn, or my website is emmalurie.co.uk. I hope you have a great day, whatever you're getting up to next, and I can't wait to share the next episode with you.